Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio. Today's show is dedicated to President Ronald Reagan, who passed away 20 years ago, this past June 5th, only days ago. There's been a willful effort by historians, most of whom are liberal Democrat academics, to downgrade Ronald Reagan's presidency. The truth is, after a recession in his first terms, Reagan's tax and regulatory cuts actually gave us the greatest economic boom in U.S. history until, well, Donald Trump came along. Reagan, you will recall, burst on the political scene in 1964 when Senator Barry Goldwater's campaign for president essentially was running out of money. And Reagan, at that point, better known as the narrator and host of Death Valley Days, a very popular TV show, gave a controversial on TV speech called A Time for Choosing. That speech, which some among Goldwater's own staff and advisors did not want to run, would catapult Reagan into the American political scene. It was not enough to save Goldwater, but it was enough to establish Reagan as a potential political force. In 1966, I actually convinced my parents to let me spend my summer vacation with a spinster aunt that I had who lived in Sacramento, my Aunt Verna. Now, I'd caught the Goldwater bug in 1964, and in the summer of 1966, at 14 years old, what I wanted to do for the summer was to work on Ronald Reagan's campaign for governor of California. So I spent the summer in Sacramento for a little more than 2 months, working every day as a volunteer at the Reagan for Governor headquarters in Sacramento. I still have the autograph that I got from Ronald Reagan when he visited his Sacramento headquarters. Little did I know that years later I would be hired to work in Reagan's 1976, 1980, and 1984 presidential campaigns. In 1968, I was conflicted. I had met former Vice President Richard Nixon at an event at the National Women's Republican Club right there in Manhattan, and we had become pen pals. I wrote to Nixon at his law office in downtown Wall Street area, and he wrote back, and that began a long correspondence. Nixon was meticulous about keeping up with his correspondence, and I became transfixed with the idea that Nixon had been denied the presidency in a stolen election in 1960, and I wrote him saying that I thought he should run again. Reagan, only 2 years into his governorship, did in fact make a last-minute bid for the 1968 Republican presidential nomination. This, of course, has been erased from all of his biographies, essentially erased from history. After Reagan was nominated in 1980, he was with the famous syndicated columnist Robert Novak. Bob Novak asked him or said to him, well, Governor, I guess the third time is the charm, meaning Reagan had run in 1968, 1976, and of course, successfully in 1980. What do you mean, Bob? Reagan said, I've only run twice, 1976 and 1988. That's really not true. Reagan was technically a favorite son candidate for president. He was running a furtive effort with Governor Nelson Rockefeller in an effort to deadlock the Republican National Convention on the first ballot. Reagan and his advisors were convinced that if Nixon could be stalled on the first ballot, that the convention would turn to them. New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller, who had a stranglehold on the New York GOP, believed that if Nixon were eliminated in the first ballot, that the convention would turn to him. So the two of them worked quietly together to try to effectuate a deadlock. Unfortunately, it didn't work. The truth is, Ronald Reagan spent $5 million on a furtive effort to win the nomination. He was technically a favorite son candidate, but on his way to Miami Beach, he made at least 5 stops to address mostly Southern Republican Party events. And when he got to Miami Beach, he dropped the facade, and at a press conference, he went from being just a favorite son candidate, essentially holding the California delegation pledge to him, to becoming a full-fledged candidate. Nancy Reagan, who was shopping in Miami Beach, reportedly heard this on the radio and was furious. I think she clearly understood her husband's ambitions to be president, but she thought after only 2 years as governor, it was premature. Reagan found, however, that the conservatives in the Republican Party, Barry Goldwater, Bill Buckley, Senator John Tower, Senator Everett Dirksen, Senator Carl Curtis, most importantly, Senator Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, had long been committed to Richard Nixon, who was in the midst of launching the greatest single political comeback in American history. You see, Nixon in 1964 had wisely figured out that Goldwater was going to win. He was going to lose. And while Nelson Rockefeller and George Romney, who was Mitt Romney's father, the governor of Michigan, and Bill Scranton, the governor of Pennsylvania, Jacob Javits, the U.S. senator from New York, all refused to endorse the Goldwater ticket, Nixon saw only opportunity for himself. In truth, Nixon made more campaign speeches for Barry Goldwater than Goldwater himself did. Nonetheless, despite addressing 16 delegations and hot-boxing delegates in a small trailer off the floor of the convention, Reagan could not break Nixon's hold on first ballot victory, and as an easy win. The New Jersey delegation, which had been pledged to Senator Clifford Case, was busted out from Case by campaign manager John Mitchell and Republican State Party Chairman Nelson Gross. Breaking that delegation actually put Nixon over the top, temporarily ending Ronald Reagan's presidential ambitions. In 1976, at the convention, when I first worked for Ronald Reagan, New York's delegation went almost completely for sitting President Gerald Ford, with one exception, that is, the delegates from Brooklyn, Kings County, voted for Ronald Reagan under the able leadership of Brooklyn County Chairman George L. Clark Jr. In 1980, however, when I was reassigned to serve as the Northeastern Regional Political Director for Ronald Reagan's campaign in New York, Reagan swept the New York primary, winning every delegate and actually catapulting George Clark from being an outcast to being chairman of the New York State Republican Party. Quite a sea change. Now, having worked for 4 presidents, I'm often asked which one of them was the greatest. It's a very difficult question to answer. Reagan personally was exactly the same way he was in public as he was in private. He was genial, easygoing, slow to anger, deeply principled, extremely interested in the big picture aspects of politics. I particularly note his discipline because, well, when you're a movie star or a television actor, your face is your career. Reagan was extremely disciplined about his diet, drank very, very sparingly, occasionally a glass of red wine just before a speech or a television taping to bring a healthy glow to his cheeks. But he had very little interest in the nitty-gritty of American politics. I spent long stretches of time with him alone in small private planes or traveling, and once the topic turned to politics, well, we didn't have a lot to talk about, strangely enough. Reagan did tell me that in his bachelor years, in between his marriage to Jane Wyman and his marriage to Nancy Davis Reagan, well, he was quite the Hollywood bachelor, telling me that he had gotten there with Betty Grable, Lana Turner, Jane Mansfield, Dolores Del Rio, some of the great beauties of the silver screen, but those days were long behind him. I've never seen anything like the devotion that Ronald and Nancy Reagan had for each other. It was their world, and it was you were outside it. I do remember on one occasion that Nancy Reagan was flying into New York to drive out to Connecticut for a Connecticut Federation of Republican Women's event, but it was early spring and it was unseasonably chilly. Governor John Davis Lodge of Connecticut and his wife, the beautiful Francesca Braggiati Lodge, were waiting in Darien for what was a outside garden event, and Nancy Reagan was freezing. I had thoughtfully figured out this might be a problem, so I had purchased a Pashina shawl, and when we arrived at the event, I gave it to Mrs. Reagan. From that moment on in the Reagan campaign, well, I could really do no wrong. But even if you knew Reagan, there was always this gulf between you and he. He was extremely focused on his performance as president. He understood intrinsically that having a president who looked strong and confident and calm was essential to convey to the nation that the nation would look at their president, and if he appeared to be confident and bold, well, they could do the same. Just before the end of his last term, very famously, Reagan was asked whether the fact that he had not come from the world of politics, but had come from the world of show business, had been detrimental to his career. He famously said, "You know, fellas, I don't know how a guy who wasn't an actor could do this job." It is extraordinary that Reagan's 2 terms were as successful as they were. There was a concerted effort to take him out in the Iran-Contra controversy, but he pled to the nation, I think honestly, that George H.W. Bush and his CIA director, Bill Casey, had done a number of things in his administration, which Reagan himself knew little about. Reagan also famously survived an assassination attempt on him in Washington, D.C. My next book is actually on that subject. I have been fascinated by the fact that the government has never released the report on the attempted assassination of Reagan. We do know that John Hinckley Jr., recently released from prison, the man convicted of the attempt on Reagan's life, managed to get off 4 bullets. He was always crouching in front of Reagan. The 4 bullets fired by Hinckley are all accounted for, and none of them hit Ronald Reagan. The truth is, Reagan was hit from above and behind. And when doctors ultimately rushed him, when the Secret Service ultimately rushed him to George Washington University Hospital, they at first could not find a bullet. They were preparing actually to sew him back up when one of the doctors who I've interviewed told me that he was dissatisfied with the X-ray results, that they decided to open Reagan's wound further and conduct a manual examination. And the doctor found a projectile. It's called a flechette. It's about the size of a quarter. It is fired by a weapon that the CIA admitted that they had in the 1970s in the famous church hearings. The flechette was used specifically for assassinations, and it is noiseless, sometimes dipped in poison, luckily in this case not. The full story here goes even further. There was a fight between Vice President George Bush and Secretary of State Al Haig as to who would control American foreign policy in the event that Reagan were incapacitated. Those documents were on Reagan's desk. Yes, I'm going to make the case, as I did in my book, The Bush Crime Family, which you can find online or go to stonezone.com. It's there in the store, or you can go to Barnes & Noble or Amazon. The Bush Crime Family is widely available. I make the case there that George H.W. Bush is complicit in the attempted assassination of Reagan. But when you write that, folks, what happens is a huge amount of information comes to you over the transom. And you have to, of course, vet that information. So my upcoming book will have a great deal more about the assassination of Reagan, things that people don't know. It's turning out to be quite a project. If you're just tuning in, I'm Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio. We are the crown jewel of AM radio, the most powerful and influential AM radio station on the face of the earth, and I will be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
And we're back, folks. This is Roger Stone on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. President Donald Trump had a surprisingly good week last week. First of all, his campaign has taken in an astounding $400 million in small and mostly medium-sized contributions. This is a historic first. Trump has never been the toast of Wall Street or the toast of the mega donors, the billionaires and millionaires, but this is clearly a people-funded campaign. In the meantime, the Georgia Appeals Court put what may be permanent stay on the case against Trump and others. They're seeking to re-examine the corruption of Fulton County prosecutor Fonnie Wills. That means that even if there is to be a Georgia trial, it is not likely to be before the next presidential election. At the same time, Judge Eileen Cannon scheduled a hearing in the Florida documents case on the question of whether or not special counsel Jack Smith's appointment is legally valid. You see, there is no special counsel law on the books, and Mr. Smith's name was never submitted to the Senate for confirmation. In essence, Attorney General Merrick Garland created a position that does not exist, funded a position that does not exist. Former Reagan Attorney General Ed Meese and two eminent law professors, neither one of whom is a Trump supporter, have filed an amicus brief with the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, Judge Cannon of Miami has scheduled a broader hearing on this question. The media, particularly the folks over at MSNBC, are apoplectic because the judge is following the law. Now, if Smith's appointment was to be declared illegitimate, all of the charges against him in Florida and D.C. would be voided. But a more vexing and troublesome question is whether Judge Juan Merchan will impose a prison sentence on Donald Trump on July 12th, which is when sentencing is scheduled. The judge will impose sentence, but I'm among those who think he will not stay that sentence pending appeal. Think about that for a moment. It is possible possible that Judge Merchant could order that the president be sent to Rikers Island on July 12th. He could be remanded right then and there, and then he would be unable to accept the nomination for president at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee on the 14th and 15th. It really does boggle the mind. In fact, the president's lawyer, Will Scharf, joins us today on the Roger Stone Show to lay out the path ahead. I'm very anxious to have that interview, well, because I found out that if you talk to the four smartest lawyers you know, you'll get four entirely different opinions about what will come next. Also today, new developments surrounding Mayor Eric Adams and the continuing double standard at the New York Police Department. 14-year New York Police Department veteran Salvatore Greco, a proud son of Staten Island, joins us today with the latest. And then, frankly, other than artificial intelligence, this is technology in which words you have never said can literally be put in your mouth. I believe internet censorship may be the single greatest threat to our republic. It is going to be used for mischief in the upcoming presidential election. We've already heard of a robocall that was dialed into New Hampshire voters, allegedly the voice of President Joe Biden, telling Democrats not to vote. There's an example. Others have floated completely fabricated audios of me threatening Democrats. I paid a pretty penny to have those examined using AI detection software, using the three best programs in the country, all completely phony. It's a political dirty trick. To examine those issues of internet censorship and AI, Gary Franchi of the Next News Network also joins me in today's show to talk about, a Texas investigation into Google's manipulation of information on the internet, as well as the challenges of internet censorship. It's a jam-packed show today, folks, so while I'm working on my 77 WABC cookbook, which has become a very popular thing here at the Roger Stone, and it's coming along, I'm going to forego a recipe today because we have so much political news. But next week, I promise you, my mother, Gloria Rose Corbo Stone's famous lasagna. I guarantee you, folks, you're not going to want to miss that, so we'll do it next week. Once again, I'm happy to have you with me today on the Roger Stone Show. Our numbers are growing by leaps and bounds. I'm particularly proud to be part of the 77 WABC radio family. Well, and as the late Jackie Gleason used to say, away we go.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Roger Stone, and you're tuned in to 77 WABC Radio. We are the crown jewel of AM radio. Let me remind you that if you're not in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area, where I grew up, You can listen to 77 WABC by going to WABCradio.com. We are actually live streaming worldwide. You can hear us, I believe it's now 173 countries around the world. So there is no reason for you to miss your 77 WABC radio fix. Take a quick minute to go to the App Store, actually, and download the 77 WABC radio app. That way, if you miss a great show, say, I don't know, the Larry Kudlow show on Saturdays, one of my favorites, you can always go back and listen to it later. So whether it's Sid Rosenberg, who you missed, or whether it's my late night friend Frank Morano, if you have the app, you can always go back and listen to those great shows that you weren't able to listen to in real time. I strongly recommend it to you. Today's show, as you know, dedicated to President Ronald Reagan, who passed away 20 years ago this past week, June 5th. I hope you enjoyed our opening tribute to one of the greatest presidents in my lifetime. I am one who thinks that internet censorship, along with artificial intelligence, are two of the most dangerous problems in the country. Joining me now is Next News Network correspondent Gary Franchi, a longtime friend. The Next News Network has over 2.2 million subscribers on YouTube, was censored by Google, and frankly has not gotten the traction that it deserves at rumble.com. The content that Gary Franchi is producing is some of the best cutting-edge news, alternative news coverage on the internet, but he is obviously had the same problems that anyone who supports a different narrative than the one embraced by the establishment has. So Gary Franchi joins us now in the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, it is great to be on the show. Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you. I try never to miss your broadcasts. I have to see them after the fact, obviously, but you know, it's funny. I watch Nicole Shanahan, who is Robert F. Kennedy's vice presidential running mate. She was previously married to Sergey Brin, who is the founder of Google, and they're divorced, which means that all of her wealth is derived from that marriage. She was, until she joined RFK, a hardcore George Soros-style liberal. She had contributed, for example, to a number of the defund the police campaigns in California. She's vaccinated and triple vaxxed. It was an odd choice, except for perhaps her wallet. But when I see her online complaining about internet censorship, it kind of grates me. I feel like saying, hey, Nicole, have a word with your ex, because I think Google may be the single greatest manipulator of online information of any of these tech giants. It's often said that Google has a monopoly on the flow of information through Google search, through YouTube, and of course through their email service at Gmail, which has over 1.8 billion active users. So, Gary, my question is, does Google have a virtual monopoly on the internet?
Oh, there's no question about that. I mean, the term Google is now it's a verb. Did you Google that? You know, so it's really got into the lexicon of America, and it's not like saying, "Hey, did you DuckDuckGo that?" No, it doesn't work like that. And So, a lot of times people forget that YouTube is also its own type of search engine. They're practically number 2 next to the Google search engine, because a lot of times people go to YouTube and they just say, how do I fix a sink, or how do I tie a tie, or, they try to find a lot of relevant information. And all that information is, of course, not a threat to the political establishment, how to tie a tie or change a tire. But when you start to talk about how do I win an election, or who is Donald Trump, or those types of political questions, when you bring those up back in, say, 2015, if you typed in Donald Trump, you would have seen my channel as the first search result. We dominated search results in YouTube during that election cycle, and we were the number 1 YouTube channel across all spectrums. I mean, we had more views than even Donald Trump's own YouTube channel, as well as the White House, Hillary Clinton, and all mainstream news channels. So we were the top channel during the 2016 election, and that was really because I saw what happened to Ron Paul back in 2012, and I said I don't want to see what the media did to Ron Paul and what the RNC did to Ron Paul happen to the next candidate of that I wanted to back. So that's why we started the Next News Network, and Donald Trump became that candidate, and we got behind him, started supporting him, and reporting a lot of different things that the mainstream media was avoiding. A lot of time during that time, it was really revolving around Hillary's health question. We interviewed a doctor who would question some of her behavioral analysis with respect to potentially having Parkinson's disease. She was coughing. She was being she had to be helped upstairs. And, of course, then at Ground Zero on 9/11 and an anniversary, she collapsed and had to be literally carried into her own van. And that was a turning point when finally, all of our reporting, we're asking these questions, something's clearly wrong, and then now the mainstream media, you couldn't avoid it anymore. They could not hide the fact because all the cameras saw her collapse. So at the end of the day, after the election of that year, of the 2016 election, our channel was on top, and the mainstream narrative started to develop that fake news helped elect Donald Trump, and that's when Hillary and Obama came out and started screaming, fake news, and of course Trump comes out and capitalizes on the term, takes it back and throws it back at CNN space and says, no, CNN, you're fake news, and really took them to task. Well, it was really our channel that helped elect Trump because the number of attacks we received. We were on the front page of the Washington Times. We were on the front page of the New York Times. The Guardian attacked us. We got attacked by Forbes. We got attacked by a lot of major outlets, and they were trying to determine what exactly happened because, like I said, all the other mainstream channels were not getting the same type of traction that we were online. We came from behind. While everyone's focusing on standard terrestrial type of media with television and radio, the internet was not really considered. YouTube was kind of like this background, you're going to watch cat videos there or how to tie a tie. But at the same time, we had created this undercurrent of truth news that people were flocking to, and it was going viral. So at the end of the day, they couldn't have that happen again. They did not want that to happen again. Google came out and eventually said, listen, we need to start to surface, and this is their words, authoritative news. And November of 2017, we noticed an 80% drop in the algorithm, or 80% drop in our views. And when I compared it to all the publicly facing statistics related to other channels, like Alex Jones or Mark Dice, or the BBC, and then or MSNBC, Fox, all the mainstream channels, I saw all of our channels, all the alternative, if you will, media channels, all take a nosedive in views, and all the mainstream channels got an uptick in views and subscribers. So, like when you go to say Fox or CNN, all those views that they get are completely inflated because the algorithm has been manipulated to present that information to the American people first. So now when you go to the search results for typing in Donald Trump, all you're going to get are mainstream news results. Our channel, if we're even lucky, would probably be on page 10. So when all this stuff started happening, we realized, okay, first of all, YouTube, we heard Susan Wojcicki, she gave a conference, and she actually came out and admitted that they were doing this. And this is all to protect, to stop misinformation. But the watershed moment really came because we suspected all this that was happening. The watershed moment came when Zach Voorhees leaked hundreds of documents outside of Google. He was an internal Google engineer, and he had enough of what he saw happening inside Google. And he took screenshots and downloaded documents. And this man is an American hero, in my opinion. And in one of those documents, it clearly showed that they listed all of these news channels. Okay, they listed the channels on news and how they would suppress the content, Roger, in an internal document. And they actually listed us. Okay, the first one, Wall Street Journal, was listed at 8.53, CBS News 6.57. Now, these are positive ranking numbers, okay? And it goes down into the negative. So it starts at the top, Wall Street Journal, CBS News, CNN, Fox News, and then Russia Today, which is curious, okay? This came in at number 5 on the list. Russia Today is obviously a Russian propaganda channel, and they're Russian state media. Now, our channel came in at the bottom of the list. They ranked us below Alex Jones' InfoWars channel. And the question is why would they go ahead and list an American news channel that was ranking above all the other channels? Why would they put us at the very bottom, even below Russia Today? So they had it in for us way back in 2017, and now they are working to actively destroy our channel because of February of a year ago, we were demonetized completely, which means that Google will not run ads on your YouTube videos. So that has significantly destroyed a major amount of revenue that we were using to pay our crew and operate our business. And now that's gone. So we're on the edge of going bankrupt. We had a fire. About 90% of our staff. There's maybe like me and 2 other people who are compiling news, producing news. I'm the chief cook and bottle washer now. I used to have a team of producers and graphic designers and technical people that were working behind the scenes so we could crank out high volume, high quality news. And we've had to cut back on all that. So what's happening now is clearly what we've seen with respect to when you ask, this is a long answer to your question, is Google manipulating the search results? Well, absolutely. Now, Project Veritas, when they had come out and they, so Zach Voorhees, he was with Project Veritas. He brought the documents to Project Veritas. Project Veritas with James O'Keefe put this out across the web. It was an amazing a moment for me because I realized now it wasn't just suspected that they were suppressing. We had it in black and white in their own internal documents that they were suppressing us. And then Project Veritas, another whistleblower comes out, not a whistleblower, but they had a honeypot operation and they got one of the Google executives a little tipsy and he starts bragging about how they're going to prevent the next Trump situation. And this is back in 2020. So now my channel gets actively suppressed in 2017. Come around 2020, they still have the same mentality. They want to prevent a Trump situation. So they are actively manipulating the search results and curating them so that you have an artificial reality when you go and when you're searching for something. And it's still ongoing. And now, this last year, like I said, we got demonetized. People, and the best part that we're seeing now is we're actually seeing Zach has for the last 5 years to get this information out. And just about, last week or 2 weeks ago, he went in front of the Texas Senate Committee on State Affairs. And he presented this information. He presented it, put it on the public record. Now, it's one thing when you go around and you do radio interviews and you're talking about all these things, you're presenting the documents on Twitter, you're writing books, but finally, his hard work paid off because he went and presented this on the record in front of the Texas Senate Committee. And the Texas Senate Committee, my YouTube channel was brought up by Zach in that committee. Now, I didn't ask him to do it. He just messaged me. He's like, "Hey, I'm going in. I'm presenting this. This is the information. It's in the documents. You're caught up in this." I said, "Okay, go for it, buddy. Godspeed." And he presented the suppression documents of how Google is manipulating the realities of every American, and unanimously following the hearing in a bipartisan 11-0 vote, that Texas Senate Committee went ahead and voted to grant subpoena power to the committee so that they could subpoena Google for internal documents related to the suppression of my channel. And now subpoenas are being drafted, as far as I understand.
I know of which you speak. If you go do a Google search on Roger Stone, the first 17 pages are about my conviction for the non-existent crime of lying under oath in my voluntary testimony about Russian collusion and WikiLeaks collaboration, that the government produced no evidence whatsoever actually happened. It isn't until the 17th page that you will find that on November 3rd, 2020, after a lawsuit by BuzzFeed, of all people, Robert Mueller was forced to disgorge, I should say DOJ was forced to disgorge his entire unredacted report, in which even he could not sugarcoat the fact that he had found no evidence of Russian collusion on my part, no evidence of collaboration with WikiLeaks. No, I did not coordinate the WikiLeaks drops regarding Hillary Clinton. In fact, he actually admitted that he hadn't found any crime at all. But you have to go 17 pages in to find any of that information. It is generally suppressed. This is extraordinarily annoying. Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is The Roger Stone Show. We're here with Gary Franchi. He is the chief correspondent at the Next News Network. We're talking about internet manipulation and censorship, and we'll be right back.
This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. This is The Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC. We're the crown jewel of AM radio, the most powerful and influential AM radio station in America today. I asked you again to go buy the App Store on your phone and get the 77 WABC radio app so you never miss any of the amazing talk or entertainment programming we have here at 77 WABC. I can't even begin to tell you how proud I am to be on the same station where I listened to Cousin Brucey as a boy. Joining me today, if you've been tuned in, is Gary Franchi. He is the chief correspondent for the Next News Network, one of the most influential net-based news organizations out there, but one who has had to contend with internet censorship, which we learned far more about after Elon Musk purchased Twitter, now known as X, and then took the courageous position of releasing all of the documents that really document the U.S. government, the FBI, Homeland Security, and others working in concert with executives at Twitter to ban, shadow ban, or just cancel people whose views they don't like. There's no greater example of the abuses than the claim that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation, that it wasn't real. Joe Biden said that in a presidential debate. It was a lie. It is also now absolutely clear, based on proceedings in a Delaware courtroom last week, that the laptop is, as the New York Post courageously reported, 100% real. They actually shut down the Twitter account for the venerable New York Post, perhaps one of the oldest newspapers in America, founded by Alexander Hamilton, for the infraction of reporting on Hunter Biden's laptop. Well, what we now know is the New York Post was wrong, and the 51 current and former intelligence assets who co-signed a letter saying it was Russian disinformation were lying, and they knew they were lying. And who is the individual who rounded those folks up? By none other than our current Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who's frankly not much better at playing the guitar than he is at statesmanship. Gary Franchi joins us and continues today for a few more minutes right here on the Roger Stone Show. Gary, what is the answer? In other words, how can this question of internet censorship be broadly addressed? Is it through Section 230, as some say, or is it through some other method?
Well, Roger, thanks for asking. First of all, I think where we need to begin is what's happening in Texas is a huge, huge step forward. The issuance of subpoenas to crack open the secrets at YouTube to understand the specifics as to why my channel was demonetized, the specific keywords, themes, and ideas that were used by and the audit methods and the algorithms behind it. Because once you go ahead and you crack that open, now you have a template, you have a roadmap to see exactly how they're censoring and suppressing all other content on the YouTube itself. Now, I think that's a good start. And also, I think once those subpoenas go out, once the information comes together, I'm going to have to find a lawyer. We can't afford one. Maybe there's somebody listening who wants to take up this case, and we can go after Google with the internal documents that'll come out from these subpoenas and hold them accountable for what they're doing by not just damaging my channel, damaging my mental health with respect to how all this is going down. But I think at the end of the day, we need to have what. Talking about House Bill 20 in Texas needs to be codified at the federal level so that there's an actual internet bill of rights, so that they can't just come in and arbitrarily wipe out your monetization without being absolutely transparent. Now, when my channel was demonetized, they did not tell me exactly what I did wrong. They pointed to some list of rules and say, go follow this, and forced me to end up deleting 28,000 videos trying to find a needle in a haystack when they wouldn't tell me. So we need to have transparency, and also we have to make sure that these big tech companies don't bow down to the White House or bow down to federal pressure, as we saw in the recent Weaponization Committee report that showed how the White House was forcing big tech to suppress American speech, even memes and satirical content, and any person's Facebook post or YouTube video being deleted because the White House didn't like the narrative coming out of these posts. That's a huge violation of the First Amendment.
It is both unconstitutional and un-American. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Gary, tell people if they want to watch the Next News Network, the best way to do that.
Well, they can find us on YouTube for now, and you can also go to Rumble. You can find us on X, formerly Twitter. Just do a search for Next News Network, and maybe you'll find us. We're not getting suppressed.
All right, Gary Franchi, thank you so much for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. You're with me here on The Roger Stone Show this beautiful Sunday afternoon, and Joining me now is former New York City police officer Salvatore Greco. Sal Greco is a 14-year veteran of the New York Police Department, a man with an unblemished record of service to the people of New York, sometimes pulling the graveyard shift in some of the most dangerous parts of New York City. He has a record, a number of arrests for DUI, but he's a man who's been abused by the NYPD. If you do a little bit of research, you'll find that because Sal Greco is a supporter of President Donald J. Trump and also a friend of mine, he was terminated by the New York City Police Department after January 6th, even though neither he nor I were at the Capitol, nor had any involvement whatsoever in the illegal actions of January 6th. There have been multiple investigations that prove that. Reuters reported as early as March of the first year of the Biden presidency that their investigation showed that I had no involvement with any of the so-called organizations that were ultimately charged with crimes. Nonetheless, the NYPD terminated Sal Greco, and they did so in a most corrupt manner. They technically dismissed him under a New York City police regulation that says, and Sal can help me here in a moment, but that he cannot associate with those who it can be reasonably believed were involved in the past or may be involved in the future in crimes. Well, unfortunately, that would include New York City Police Captain Eric Adams, because well, he writes in his own biography that he provided paid outside off-duty bodyguard services for Reverend Louis Farrakhan and Mike Tyson, both convicted felons. But that just scratches the surface in the willful violation of the current brass of NYPD, who violate that regulation under which Sal Greco was terminated. Sal Greco lost his life savings, lost his dream job. He was proud to be a police officer and serve the people, and he's sued the New York Police Department. The city has tried twice to have that lawsuit dismissed, and both times it has been denied by a federal judge. 7 months ago, the judge ordered NYPD to produce a discovery regarding the termination of Salvatore Greco, and they have flouted that order and provided nothing. So Sal Greco has become a one-man truth squad, and his goal has been to demonstrate that the people who terminated him are violating the very regulation under which he was terminated every single day. Salvatore Greco, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger. It's an honor to be here on the Roger Stone Show once again on WABC.
So, Sal, you've had an extraordinarily difficult road here. You have been steadfast in your efforts for justice. There are multiple examples of the New York City Police Department violating this regulation. I remember specifically, for example, when they had Cardi B, who had a particularly foul-mouthed attack on Donald Trump on the internet this past week, but a woman who's been convicted of gang crimes actually speak at the New York Police Academy. Now, since she can reasonably be believed to have engaged in criminal activity in the past, never mind the future, I would argue that all of those NYPD brass that came in touch with her violated the same regulation they fired you for, but nothing seems to happen. Tell us what's going on here, Sal.
Yeah, so as you stated, the rule that they violated is the same rule they said I violated, because in their eyes, they were stating that you would be the person that is likely to have engaged in or reasonably believed to have engaged in criminal activity. Now, here's a part of this, Roger, that the rule has to apply to every rank in a police department, whether it's uniformed or civilian. So the police commissioner also falls into this rule also. They have to oblige by it. You can't just flout it, and there's no way out. It doesn't have any exceptions to that rule. So, yes, Cardi B did go to the police academy, and at that time it was how my lawsuit originally held up in court. But we didn't know this other part here, Roger. So while, I had met you and I'm hanging out with you and we're friends and I'm supporting Donald Trump, I didn't know that the police department, which is the upper management, now we're talking about chiefs, police commissioner, the upper management, high-ranking people, were associating with an individual by the name of Jimmy Rodriguez Jr. Who is Jimmy Rodriguez Jr.? Okay. Jimmy Rodriguez used to own a place a long time ago in the Bronx called Jimmy's Bronx Cafe. It was very notorious for many reasons. Why? Many notorious characters, nefarious characters were there. There were many shootings that happened there. There were many unsolved murders that happened, a couple unsolved murders. There was drug deals going on there. Major League Baseball banned their own players from attending this place for a couple of years. It was notorious for many negative things that happened in the Bronx. So we come to find out that Jimmy Rodriguez, who owned this one place in the Bronx and many others, is also a mob associate, which was, we found this out by on a podcast by a guy by the name of John Panisi from Sit Down News, and he's also a self-admitted criminal. He's in the New Yorker stating how many times he was arrested, and he was also arrested yet again back in the late 90s. So we come to find out that for every police commissioner, the last four, I believe, was Dermot Shea, Keyshawn Sewell, Eddie Caban, they were associating with Jimmy Rodriguez. And how do we know that? There's pictures and videos of it from the new place that he has. That he's the creator manager of, and it's called Con Sofrito, and it's in the Bronx. But the twist here, Roger, is that the place is owned by the police commissioner now, the current police commissioner, Eddie Caban's brother, Richard Caban. And Richard Caban was a member of the police department. He was a lieutenant that retired out of all things, the narcotics unit. So it looks like Eddie Caban is pictured numerous times with Jimmy Rodriguez. In fact, he has Jimmy Rodriguez at one police plaza. He has him at events. And then we also see the illustrious mayor of New York, the nightlife mayor, as he likes to call himself, Eric Adams. Eric Adams also associated with Jimmy Rodriguez. And it's just a plethora of people hanging out at this place. And unfortunately for them, not only is Jimmy Rodriguez, who would fall under this category, pictured with them, but also numerous other criminals, Roger. We're talking notorious, well-known felon rappers like Fat Joe, Peter Guns. And these people also have been associated with Jimmy for a very long time. Also, Jimmy is also a well-known Democrat operative. Back in the late 90s, he knew Jose Serrano, which was a congressperson, was pictured with him, and Bill Clinton, who was the president at the time. Here's another well-known fact. I'm going to throw this out there. Back when Hillary Clinton ran her original run for Senate, when she announced this, she announced it at a laundromat that was owned by Jimmy Rodriguez, whose partner became an informant or was indicted by the feds. And on his door was a receipt from Jimmy's Cafe. So just to tell people that he was closing and pick up the money or whatever he owed from the laundromat. I want to just point out how entrenched this man is with the Democrat apparatus, also the criminality that surrounds all the places he was at, and why and how. And the question is why and how is the police department hanging out at his place along with Eric Adams, and also Letitia James and Carl Hasty and numerous other Democrat politicians in the whole state, the entire state of New York.
So the real question here, I guess, is the double standard. I saw that City and State, the news outlet, actually had a story about these violations at Con Sofrito. Tell us about that.
Yes, well, the Dean of Journalism in New York City, Greg Smith, wrote an article in the City. He's been following this story. So what we came to find out about Con Sofrito was that they were flouting numerous court orders. So what happened here is that there was a party shed that was conducted illegal. It was constructed illegally on the property, and it was their party room. So you have to understand that the property in itself stands in a zone where it's a special zoning from the 1970s, that to even put a structure on a property you need permission from a committee, a special committee. It's impossible to get permission for this. So they constructed this. It's a 161 seated structure. It's about 50 by 100 feet, and they found this to be a public safety hazard and a fire trap. How do we know this? On the day that they awarded a SLA liquor license to Richard Caban, the Department of Buildings went there and told them they had to tear the structure down way back in 2022. So somehow they were operating from that moment on all the way up until today. And also the fire department issued 20 violations stating that the fire suppression system of one of the violations, they don't even have a fire suppression system. So basically, this place operated illegally. On top of that, they were found in court that they were in a workers' compensation case that they got fined by the state for $8,000. So Greg Smith wrote this article as a follow-up because we had found that there was a suit by the landlord to try to evict them. They had put a restraining order that stated in late December, and it says it in this article in the city.nyc. Anyone could read this. And it stated in there that they owed $7,000 in a water bill. Funny how Eric Adams said he wants to enforce people not paying their water bill, but doesn't look at his own friend, Richard Caban. And also that they owed $14,000 in back rent, and all these other numerous things that they owed the landlord. So they told them they had to take the structure down. And of all days, this was late December 2023, they found them on January 6th of 2024 to have another party that was sponsored by Internal Affairs, of all things, Roger. As you know, Internal Affairs, you watched them in my own trial, in my department trial. You were there to see how this Sergeant Orenstein was using illegal subpoenas and perjured himself in my own case, along with two other cases in the past. These are the people that were they sponsored this party and this illegal party shed, which they should have done their homework to have this event, the NYPD there. So he had discovered all of these things. So the landlord got them to admit to a stipulated agreement that they also didn't honor. They were going to tear down the shed, pay all these back, whatever they owed, and agreed to leave by August 31st. So the shed remained there. So after March 1st, obviously they gave them a couple of days. They realized they didn't take the shed down, so they were going back and forth in court all the way till the other day, where finally the judge stepped in and said, listen, we're going to have an emergency meeting because you're flouting another court order. And at the 11th hour, Roger, lo and behold, the structure finally was taken down. Finally, after all this time. It took all this time to take this illegal party shed down. The lawyer for the landlord has stated how they were flouting the law. He had no other way around it other than going to the court and asking this judge to get involved. And if it wasn't for the judge, they would still be flouting the law, which shows that, we wonder, Roger, will Letitia James and Carl Hasty, who's the assembly leader, and Eric Adams, and all these characters that are there, Darcel Clark, the Bronx district attorney, you would believe, Roger, that these people, knowing that they know him, empowered him. Because I don't know any other place, Roger, in New York City that has a violation or any kind of violation and doesn't attempt to pay their fines or fix that problem, wouldn't get shut down immediately by the marshals or the sheriffs of New York City.
We do certainly seem to have a two-tiered system here, Sal. Let's go back to your lawsuit if we can. It's now been 3 years. I know you're working 2 jobs to make ends meet. I know you burned through your personal resources to finance this lawsuit. The city has tried 2 times to have it dismissed. It's not going to be dismissed. The egregious double standard by the current police commissioner, who associates with a known convicted felon on an ongoing basis, is just the latest demonstration of this outrage. You have used the internet very, very effectively to bring public attention to the double standard that is being applied to you. What I'm really perplexed about is how the city of New York, or the New York Police Department, I should say, has been ordered to turn over in discovery all of their emails regarding your termination. That was 7 months ago. They still have not done so. Why are they allowed to violate the law with impunity?
Yes, Roger. So what we're doing is we actually have to give a letter to the judge, and the only way we're going to get anything would be if the judge gets involved. There's been numerous delays on trying to get this discovery from the police department. I don't know if it's the law department or the police department or combination, but everything and every agency underneath Eric Adams is in a complete upheaval. As you know, the law department recently, the head of corporation counsel was let go. But as I was told about this situation, she brought up, the former head of the law department brought up to Eric Adams how, as I tried to FOIA request the information, when he's being sued in a sexual assault case from 30 years ago using the very laws they used to get Donald Trump for with the E. Jean Carroll case. So Eric Adams was being sued, and I filed a FOIA request because as a city employee under GML 50K2, you cannot be represented for sexual assault, rape, or anything, any of that kind of behavior, because it doesn't fall under the scope of an active police officer's duty or an employee's duty. So she brought this up to him, and of course there is no letter. And why we know there was no letter? They actually sent it to him. He says there's no such letter to this. So once she brought this up to him, he had her let go by going to Ingrid Lewis, his right-hand woman, and she asked her to resign. So we can see that there's an upheaval here in the law department, Roger. So the problem also is that the city is running at a complete dysfunctional course due to Eric Adams' inept leadership in itself, because he puts all his friends in these positions and lets them do whatever they want.
Very, very well put. Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio. We are talking to veteran New York City police officer Salvatore Greco. Sal has his own show now on the net as he talks about criminal justice issues as well as continuing to fight for justice in his own case. Don't go anywhere at all. Hang on, and we'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC. We're talking to former New York City police officer Sal Greco, who served the people of New York City with a flawless record, a spotless record of service in his tenure as a New York police officer, often being detailed to some of the most dangerous precincts in the city for the graveyard shift. He joins us now. Sal, you, as I discussed earlier, you were terminated by NYPD in the wake of the January 6th events. A thorough investigation proved that neither you nor I had anything to do with any illegal activity. We weren't at the Capitol. You were with me in our hotel room. We watched it all on TV. You'll find a lot of crazy people on X, formerly known as Twitter, saying otherwise, but it's not a fact. This past week, former White House staffer Steve Bannon, who now has a very popular show, The War Room, a name he actually stole from my show at InfoWars, my show I used to do with Owen Schroyer. And despite being allowed to remain at liberty on appeal in the case where he was subpoenaed by the January 6th committee and flouted that subpoena, I think some people were surprised when the judge ordered his immediate incarceration, which I believe comes up, I think he has to surrender July 1st. Having been through the meat grinder of the D.C. system, I was not even surprised in the slightest. His lawyer, David Schoen, told me that he had spent 20 hours on his pleading for that hearing, and that 5 minutes into his presentation, the judge cut him off and produced a 94-page opinion in which he had already decided that Mr. Bannon must go to prison, which shows you, folks, that the law, the facts, the evidence doesn't matter. In this particular case, Judge Nichols contradicted everything he had said about this case in the earlier proceedings on it. Bannon's defense that he relied on the advice of counsel and that his counsel had told him that he did not have an obligation to testify because President Donald Trump had asserted executive privilege over his testimony, that he acted in the only lawful way that he could, but that did not matter. So I think that at this point, Steve Bannon, if he is remanded July 1st and he serves 4 months, he will get out a couple days before the general election. I really am perplexed, I must say, as to why he did not do what I did when I was subpoenaed. I fulfilled my legal obligations. I showed up and I asserted my Fifth Amendment rights, not because I did anything wrong, not because I had anything whatsoever to hide, but because I knew in this rigged January Select Committee, anything you did say would be twisted into some kind of a process crime. And therefore, I fulfilled my obligations under the subpoena. I'm not really sure why Bannon did that. Your reaction to this news that Steve Bannon will be incarcerated?
Well, Steve Bannon has a lot of issues. He's had a lot of issues going back to your very trial. So I'm going to say this. I had my own feelings about him because I know that he perjured himself at your trial when he was there. He said one thing to the House committee at that time and another thing at your trial, which contradicted it, because in one area he said you were not the access point to WikiLeaks, and the other side he said you were. And without his testimony, your trial would have never ended in a conviction because they used his word. He was the only guy with any kind of credibility at that trial. So that was the beginning part of him. He then was involved in this Build the Wall scam where everybody else had to face prison time. He got pardoned for it, but now he's got that case coming up again in Brooklyn because they re-indicted him on that. And it's going to be under Juan Merchan in September of this year. So he's got a lot of problems coming up. He's had a whole bunch of problems. All he had to do here, Roger, and I could attest this because I had to be in front of that January 6th committee, as you remember, and I didn't plead the Fifth. I actually spoke to them, which you could see online. There was nothing for me to hide. But Steve Bannon wanted to hide behind this thing that he had executive privilege, and Peter Navarro did the same thing, but yet Peter Navarro was treated completely different than Steve Bannon. So and he was in a different court with a different judge, and it's in the same district and a different judge. But yet Peter Navarro, he wanted to appeal. His appeal was heard immediately. He was told that it was denied on the three justices, and then he was ordered to go to jail immediately. Steve Bannon was allowed to stay out from November until now. And then when his appeal was finally heard 7 months or 7 months ago, they finally made a ruling 8 months later, which is odd. And then they said, well, we deny you. And now all of his ways out have been exhausted, so now he has to go to prison. I don't think he should be treated any different than anybody else. I mean, he sure as hell was willing to lie to put you in prison. So that just shows you what kind of a guy you're dealing with. I know this guy says he's the voice of MAGA. Go out on, actually, there's an article about him on darktruths.net, and the title is Steve Bannon visited sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein in New York and Paris and coached a pedophile for a 60 minutes interview. It's by Thomas Paine. It's quite interesting read. And that's all you need to know right there in the headline about Steve Bannon. He's a man of many hidden truths that people really don't know about unless you look at. So I just think that he should be treated no different than Peter Navarro, who unfortunately has been serving his time that he got, unfortunately. And Steve Bannon has been out there running around the country. I don't know on whose dime, but he's running around the country while Peter Navarro has been rotting in prison, and that's unfair.
Well, what you say is true, Sal. Steve Bannon testified before the House Intelligence Committee when asked by Adam Schiff whether he ever spoke to me about WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, or the allegedly stolen emails. He said no. And Schiff said on no occasion. Bannon said no on no occasion. At my trial, when asked the exact same question, he said yes. Stone brought it up in every phone conversation we had in 2016, and I considered him our access point with WikiLeaks, which I most definitely was not. No less than Jonathan Turley noted in the New York Post that both of those things cannot be true, and therefore Bannon has to have perjured himself in one place or the other. I can tell you which one it was, since I never discussed anything of the nature with Steve Bannon. But the Bible teaches us to forgive. It's the hardest single thing about being a Christian, particularly if you're Sicilian. It's the hardest possible thing. But I have forgiven Steve Bannon, but I have not forgotten that he was to help Robert Mueller send me to prison for 7 to 9 years, when in fact I had done nothing whatsoever wrong. Sal Greco, thank you so much for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger. It's been an honor. And check me out on YouTube at The Sal Greco Show.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show. It's the place for politics. President Donald Trump has had a quite extraordinary week, raising over $400 million in small and medium-sized donations for his campaign. Meanwhile, the Georgia Appeals Court has put a stay on the case against President Donald Trump that was brought by the Fulton County prosecutor. There's also a promising development in Florida where Judge Eileen Cannon has broadened and extended a hearing into a motion by President Trump's lawyers, which questions whether the very appointment of special counsel Jack Smith is legal and therefore legitimate. And of course, if Smith were to be ruled to have been illegally appointed, obviously the charges he files would be voided. But the question on, I think, most Americans' minds, certainly most Trump supporters' minds, is what will happen when the president goes for sentencing on July 12th in this travesty of a case in Manhattan in which to this day we still cannot determine the underlying federal crime which made the financial transactions that Donald Trump was accused of making a felony, a criminal matter. Joining me now to address these issues is Will Scharf. Will Scharf is one of President Trump's attorneys. I've had him as a guest previously. I am very comforted by the fact that Will is among those lawyers working on President Trump's appeal. Will Scharf, thank you so much for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
Always great to be with you, Roger. Really appreciate you having me on.
Very, very honored to have you on. You know, Will, one of the things I learned this past week is you can go to 4 of the smartest lawyers you know. Lawyers who understand that it's not just what's in the pleadings and what happens in the courtroom that's important. Yes, those things are incredibly important, but it's also what happens outside the courtroom in the sense that public events and the media coverage of public events still affects what goes on in court. I didn't really realize that in the Alvin Bragg trial in New York, or that the jurors were never sequestered. So on the weekends, the weekend before the president, I think, was unjustly convicted, we have to assume, despite an order by the judge, don't watch any television, that all of that news coverage impacts a judicial situation like this. I guess what most people want to know is, what is the path forward? Having been subjected to a Soviet-style show trial myself in Washington, D.C., a trial in which the Constitution, the rules, the facts, the evidence, none of those things mattered, a trial in which, just as President Trump was not allowed to call the former chairman, vice chairman, and general counsel of the Federal Election Commission as a witness, he presumably would have testified that there was no campaign finance crime here. I was not allowed to call Bill Binney, the former CIA counterterrorism expert, counterterrorism tech expert, who could have testified and proved with forensic evidence that there never was any online hack of the Democratic National Committee, not by Russian intelligence or anyone else. But of course, I wasn't allowed to call him as a witness because he would have undermined the entire premise of the relatively flimsy case against me. President Trump was subjected to the same kind of limitations. So anyway, the real question, I guess my first question for you, Will, stop filibustering, is what happens next? What must the president's attorneys do next?
Yeah, well, I think you're framing it exactly correctly, Roger. This was a show trial in the finest sense of the word. The case itself, it's a complicated legal theory that should have never seen the inside of a courtroom. The allegations in question date back almost a decade, over half a decade. This case could have been brought at any time. It wasn't brought because of how flimsy a case it was. And then suddenly President Trump decides to run for president again. They rush this thing into a grand jury. They rush it into court at the height of a presidential election. There was a media circus from day one outside the court in Manhattan. I know you saw a lot of that. And this was a case that was designed to do one thing and one thing only, which was give the Biden campaign a talking point. There was no legal reason to bring this case. President Trump did nothing wrong. I think we actually proved that over the course of trial. But unfortunately, you had a judge who I believe was irretrievably biased, who should have recused off of this case, and who shaped the proceedings in such a way that we ended up where we are now. We're going to vigorously challenge almost every aspect of this trial on appeal. That's already in the works now. We're ready to roll there. We're considering other options in terms of other legal attacks on this judgment. We are going to make sure that in the end, President Trump's rights are vindicated, because a terrible injustice has been done in this New York court, and it should not stand for the good of President Trump, but also for the good of the Republic. You can't have this sort of process play out. You can't have our system of elections subverted with a campaign of lawfare like we've seen. I think that if we don't win, we're entering Banana Republic territory. If we're not already there, that it could truly be the end of the American Republic. So we're fighting on all fronts. We're excited to get this case into the next court. We're excited to take it all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if we need to. And that's what we're going to do if that's what it takes to vindicate President Trump's rights here.
Now, as you know, I'm not an attorney. Are you able to file an appeal prior to sentencing?
We can't file a direct appeal of the verdict prior to sentencing because we don't have a judgment yet. There's no technical judgment in the case. There are potentially other options for what would be called a collateral attack on the judgment. A lot of very smart lawyers are looking at that now. If we have the ability to do that, if we have the ability to prevent sentencing from happening, we'd obviously want to do that. But certainly as of July 11th, the ballpark's open, and we have a lot of options to make sure that this injustice doesn't stand.
At least one very smart lawyer told me that one option was for the president's lawyers to ask for an expedited an expedited sentencing. And if the judge were to deny that, looking at the election, of course, that won't give you leave to go to the Supreme Court on a due process argument. Your thoughts about that theory?
I need to be a little careful about what I say, but we're considering all options, and it is I'd say a strong priority of ours to expedite these proceedings every step of the way, to expedite our appeals at every step of the way, to make sure that we get in front of a fair court as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I understand you are limited in what you can say, and I very much appreciate your joining us for the show today on that condition. Will, you're running yourself as a candidate for Attorney General of your home state of Missouri. People don't know how all-consuming a campaign for public office is, any public office. So between your defense of the president, your involvement with the president's legal team, which gives me great comfort because I have an extraordinarily high regard for your capabilities, and your own campaign for Attorney General, when do you sleep?
I don't sleep, Roger. I haven't slept in a very long time. It's the voters of Missouri, the Republican voters of Missouri, I think appreciate the work that I'm doing for the president. And I've just been heartened by the support that I've gotten here in Missouri for the work that the team and I are doing for the president. And really, just as I've gotten around the state, we hear the same thing everywhere, which is deep dissatisfaction with the political establishment, both Democrats and Republicans. People understand that things, in our country, in our state, aren't working well. And I think they want conservative outsiders to really shake things up. And that's core to our message. That's the message that we're carrying to the people of Missouri. But obviously, President Trump's cases are an absolute priority. We're making sure that we get done everything we need to get done for him. And we're going to keep fighting for him because he's always fought for us.
I think it is extraordinarily selfless on your part because I understand, that there have to be occasions where you put aside campaign activities to put a higher priority on defending the greatest president since Abraham Lincoln. So I commend you for that. Your reaction to the announcement that the appeals court in Georgia has stayed trial in that state, evidently now going to re-examine the epic corruption of Fulton County prosecutor Fonnie Wills. Your reaction?
Yeah, it's really important to remember New York has gotten so much media attention. We need to think about what the larger scheme was here. What the Democrats, what Joe Biden and his allies wanted was for President Trump to be stuck in trial after trial after trial, basically this entire year. Fortunately, because of the work that our team's been able to do, these other prosecutions, the two federal cases in D.C. and Florida, the state case brought by Fani Willis in Georgia. It's highly unlikely, almost impossible, that any of those cases are going to proceed to trial before the election, which means that President Trump will have a relatively clear field to go out and do what he does best, which is carry his message to the American people. In this Georgia case, epic corruption by Fani Willis. That's another case that should have never been brought. And she obviously hired her secret lover, this guy Nathan Wade, to prosecute that case, creating all kinds of conflicts of interest. She should have been disqualified by the trial court, but we were happy that that issue was certified to the Court of Appeals. And now it looks like the Georgia appellate courts are going to step in and do the right thing. She absolutely should be disqualified, but at the very least, the timeline of that case now has been elongated significantly, such that it's essentially impossible that it could proceed to trial before the election, which in and of itself is a great win. But I think Fani Willis herself is now in more legal jeopardy than any of the defendants in that Georgia case, just because of all of the corruption, the conflicts of interest, just because of the way she decided to handle that prosecution, which really goes to show, I believe, that this whole leftist campaign of lawfare, it's failing. The American people see through it. Courts are seeing through it. Folks understand what's going on here, and we just need to keep on fighting and keep on winning.
We've talked about this before. As you know, during my own trial, one of the witnesses that the government wanted to call, a young guy who worked for me named Andrew Miller, did not want to testify. Now, the truth is there was nothing that he could possibly have said that was detrimental to me. Why the prosecutors wanted to call him was a mystery, but it really became a fight over, how big their authority was, not the facts. His attorney, extraordinarily able, Paul Kamenar, raised the question about whether Robert Mueller's appointment was legal, because Robert Mueller was not a sitting U.S. attorney, and there was and is no special counsel law in place. There's an amazing exchange I'm going to play for you between Congressman Thomas Massie and Attorney General Merrick Garland. Let's listen.
Was Jack Smith nominated by President Biden or confirmed by the U.S. Senate?
Look, you're asking me about a case again. Motions filed.
This is a simple question.
No, I'm not.
Was Jack Smith nominated by President Biden?
No, he was not.
Was he confirmed by the Senate?
No, he was not.
When was the special counsel statute passed?
There is no special counsel statute. There was an independent counsel statute that was expired.
So it expired. So what gives you the authority to appoint a special counsel? You've created an office in the U.S. government that does not exist without authorization from Congress.
An extraordinarily powerful exchange there. That was Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky and U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland. In the D.C. case, Mr. Miller took his case to the trial judge, who, of course, denied it. Then it went to the appeals court. They also denied it. And then he ran out of time. Certainly could have taken his case to the U.S. Supreme Court, but lo and behold, once they could call him as a witness, they didn't. The issues here are exactly the same. Former Attorney General Ed Meese and two highly respected law school professors, neither one of whom, by the way, is a Trump supporter or a Republican, have raised this exact question regarding Jack Smith. Now, I was a little surprised when Clarence Thomas, during the immunity question hearing, asked one of your associates whether we were raising that issue, but then raising it in the D.C. system on appeal would make no sense at all. The D.C. courts having ruled wrongly, incorrectly on this issue previously, but the president's legal team preserved this issue in Florida, and now Judge Eileen Cannon, has agreed to hear it. The folks at MSNBC are going literally out of their minds. Your feelings about this argument and the potential here?
Yeah, I think it's very clear that Jack Smith's appointment is unconstitutional. As you said, we had bad case law on that in the D.C. Circuit, so we chose to raise that first in the Florida case. That's now set for a hearing. Judge Cannon seems to be taking these issues very seriously. She actually granted General Meese and his team the opportunity to be heard at the hearing there as amici, which is not all that common. So she seems to be taking that quite seriously. If she were to rule that Jack Smith was unconstitutionally appointed, that would lead to a dismissal, would likely lead to a dismissal of the Florida prosecution, and could easily lead to the dismissal of the D.C. prosecution as well. We would expect that to be a decision there to be appealed by the Department of Justice, by Jack Smith's team, and that could easily end up before the Supreme Court quite quickly. But we feel very good about our arguments there. As you indicated, deep constitutional problems with the idea that you can just appoint a guy without Senate confirmation, without going through the usual constitutional process, and that guy can then bring indictments in his own name, can do all the things that a U.S. attorney would ordinarily do. Typically, when you have special counsels appointed, they are already Senate confirmed. They are U.S. attorneys or other Senate confirmed officials. With Jack Smith, that's obviously not the case. So we're in constitutionally dubious territory with respect to the initiation of these prosecutions, much less the way that they've been conducted. We feel good about our chances in Florida. I think that, it's clear that Judge Cannon is at the very least taking these arguments seriously and wants to be properly apprised of their merits by all parties.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC Radio, and we are talking to one of President Donald Trump's defense attorneys, Will Scharf. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're going to continue with Attorney Scharf after this brief commercial message, so don't go away.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. Yes, this is the Roger Stone Show, and I'm here with Will Scharf, one of President Donald Trump's most able attorneys, a man who's deeply involved in his appeal and his legal maneuvering in the wake of this horrific conviction in New York City, where I saw that Jonathan Turley, who I have a huge high regard for, say yesterday that a week after the trial, he still doesn't know what the underlying crime that Donald Trump was convicted of is. This one from column B, one from column A, random choice, was something that's never been seen before. So in other words, to explain this as best as I can, for the financial transactions in question to be to rise to the level of a felony, a criminal offense, they have to either be connected to or be part of covering up some larger underlying federal crime, which the prosecutors never actually established. Will, is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The theory of the case shifted wildly over the course of the trial. I don't think we were on proper notice in terms of President Trump's due process rights until closing arguments. Trials are not supposed to be trial by surprise. You're supposed to lay out your cards and everyone's supposed to be on the same page in terms of what's at issue. And that really wasn't the case here. So there are a lot of constitutional issues with the way this trial was conducted. That lack of notice is a very real one. This is sort of a Frankenstein case cobbled together from different parts and different theories. And it's one of a kind. I've never seen anything like it in my career in practicing law, and I know that experts like Jonathan Turley have said the same.
So one of the things I told you I wanted to focus on is Donald Trump, the man. I've known him for 45 years, and I may be among the first people in the country to urge him to run for president as early as 1988. I saw fairly early that he had the size, I don't mean the physical size, but the stature, the courage, the strength, the stamina to be a great president, not just a great presidential candidate, but a great president. I also understood his non-establishment politics. He had, as a businessman, supported both Republicans and Democrats, and in almost all cases, been extraordinarily disappointed in our federal government and how they acted. He has, going all the way back to 1988, thought that our NATO allies were taking advantage of us, that we were paying for their defense, but they were never paying their fair share, never paying their bills. This is not a new issue. He's been talking about it since 1988. He hated the one-size-fits-all international trade deals in which they were great for our trading partners. They weren't so great for us, however. He's been amazingly consistent, but the question I'm asked constantly is, how does he put up with the stress of all of this? In other words, how does he stand up to it? And my answer is, he's literally the toughest man I've ever met. I mean, I worked for Richard Nixon. I worked for Senator Bob Dole. They're both great men. They're both very tough men. Donald Trump is tougher and more resilient than anybody I've ever met. I thought his interviews with Sean Hannity were some of the best I've ever seen. He was masterful. This idea that he's under pressure or hysterical, I know from my own conversations with him, just not true. Just not true. Well, in your own interactions with him, what are your observations?
Yeah, he's relentless. He has boundless energy. I honestly believe that he doesn't let any of this faze him. I think he's deeply committed to the mission of bringing back American greatness, of getting back into the White House and doing all of the important things that he has to do. This leftist campaign of lawfare would have worn down any normal politician. There's no way that anyone else could have dealt with it the way that President Trump is dealing with it. And I've just been amazed at every step of the way, as you said, just how resilient he is, and the fact that the man just doesn't stop. I mean, the fact that he can go on stage and give these 90-minute speeches night after night after night, the fact that he's out, every single day all over the country while dealing with everything that he's dealing with, and that he's able to, just keep it going. It's frankly amazing. And I think it just speaks to the kind of person he is. I think he's just a remarkable man, and it's an honor to work for him.
Well, I knew both his parents, Fred and Mary, very well. They were both vital into their 90s. Fred Trump still going to the office in his middle 90s. Donald Trump is of tough German and Scottish stock. He is, as you point out, relentless. What really aggravates me is when Joe Biden keeps saying, this is all about Trump. It's Trump's campaign is all about Trump. Well, if this were about Trump, he would retire. He could retire to the greatest life in the world. He's got the most beautiful golf courses in the country. His golf course outside of Los Angeles is breathtaking. He could spend more time with his family and his grandchildren, and instead, he puts himself in the line of fire because he loves the country, because he doesn't like seeing what happened to the country. And making it worse, he realizes the difference between what great shape we were in when he left office and the condition that we're in today. So I agree with your observation. It's not about him. It's about America. A lesser man would have quit by now. But the one thing you can say about Donald J. Trump is that he will never quit. Will, let me ask you, if folks wanted to learn more about your campaign for Attorney General in Missouri, they want to give a campaign contribution, read more about you, where can they go?
Our website is votescharf.com, VOTESCHARF.com. And you can find me on social media, on Twitter, on Truth Social, Instagram, Facebook, just at Will Scharf. But yeah, I really appreciate it, Roger. Always great to join you, and thanks so much for having me on.
All right. Many thanks to Will Scharf, one of President Donald Trump's attorneys working on his upcoming appeal. Thanks for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show. I'm exceptionally proud to be a member of the 77 WABC radio family, and I ask you to stay tuned because my good friend Joe Piscopo will be right along with Sundays with Sinatra.